The sound of an urgent alarm fills the cockpit.
Go around, go for it.
It's the low altitude warning. To the pilots, it seems impossible. They don't even have the runway in sight yet.
Go around! Go around thrust.
The captain decides to abort the landing. But it may be too late. The crew of British Midlands Flight 92 is completing final takeoff preparations for a short flight to Belfast, Northern Ireland. Captain Kevin Hunt flew the plane in from Belfast. First Officer David McClellan takes the controls for the return trip.
Thrust set. Here we go.
0.
As Flight 92 clears the busy airspace around Heathrow, the controller permits the crew to climb to the cruising altitude, 35,000 feet.
Can I have a coffee too, please?
13 minutes into the flight,
Oh.
You smell that?
Is that smoke?
there's a problem with one of the 737's two engines. Captain Hunt takes control, leaving his first officer to work out what's wrong with the plane.
It's a fire, Kevin.
Which one is it?
It's the right one.
The crew tries to stabilize the problem engine by reducing power on that side.
Okay, throttle it back.
Throttle it back.
Seems to be running all right now.
The crew seems to have solved the immediate crisis.
But we've still got the smoke.
But want to get back on the ground as fast as possible.
This is Midland 92. We've got an engine fire. We need to divert to East Midlands.
Understood. Cleared for descent to 10,000 feet.
Flight 92 is just 15 minutes from East Midlands Airport. It's closer than returning to Heathrow.
Landing lights.
On.
The pilots will have to make the landing with just one engine.
Flaps 1, please.
To land safely at low speed,
Flaps 1.
the pilots need to set their flaps to increase lift
Power, please.
and call for more power from their one remaining engine. The pilots face a terrifying new danger.
We're losing another engine.
Incredibly, the left engine is now failing. Their plane could soon have no engine power at all. Flight 92 is less than 1,000 feet from the ground. The pilots need to think fast.
Try relighting the other one.
They try to restart the engine they shut down.
It's not. I can't seem to.
It won't start. One engine is dead. The other is in flames.
I have to stretch the glide.
Captain Hunt pulls up the nose of the plane, hoping to stay in the air long enough to reach the airport. But more and more alarms are filling the cockpit.
Damn it!
The stall warning shakes the captain's controls. A deadly sign that they're about to lose their lift. British Midlands Flight 92 has slammed into an embankment beside the M1 highway, just half a mile from the airport. 87 of the 126 people on board are alive, but many are injured, including Captain Hunt, who has a broken spine. Chris Pollard scrutinizes engine debris recovered from farmland near Kegworth. Every fragment is a potential clue about what happened to British Midlands Flight 92.
Some bits were extremely small. It is actually a tribute to the quality of the search that we got as much as we did.
One fragment stands out.
Gotcha.
It shows clear signs of metal fatigue. Because of where it was found, Pollard believes it was almost certainly the first thing to break on the 737.
If we assume that the fatigue failure was the first failure, that would have lost about 4 inches off the end of one of the blades.
The finding could explain how the engine failure began. Even one broken fan blade can disturb the flow of air through an engine, causing it to surge, a process similar to a car backfiring.
What is it, the engines?
The engine tries to find a new balance, and to do that, it rattles around.
Be all right, man.
There would have been a lot of physical vibration. The passengers reported that it was like the sound of, in a tumble dryer, of rocks and stuff being thrown around. It would have really been quite violent.
No two fan blades are ever exactly the same. Pollard hopes a metallurgical examination will tell him which engine the weakened blade came from.
Although the blades were all nominally of exactly the same alloy, there were, if you started to look in the sort of parts per million analysis of these things, there were slight differences between each blade.
Pollard soon has an answer.
Blade 17, left engine.
The blade that broke first and caused the vibration came from the left engine. Investigators now face a troubling question. Why did the pilot shut down the right engine if the vibrations were in the left?
A crew this experienced? It's hard to believe they would shut down the wrong engine.
Pilots have an array of instruments that tell them about the operation of their engines, including one that measures vibration. There's another possibility. The vibration may have been so severe that it became impossible to read the shuttering gauges.
Right, here are gauges.
The layout of the cockpit instruments may provide a partial explanation.
Right engine. Right. Oh. See, I can see how you'd mess this up.
The gauges that measure vibration sit on the right side of the panel. Under stress, the first officer may have thought they correspond to the right engine.
The problem is definitely in the right engine.
But the theory doesn't hold up. If the crew shut down the good right engine, why did the vibrations suddenly stop in the faulty left engine?
They reduce the power on the right engine, but somehow the left engine settles down.
An important piece is missing from this puzzle.
You need a little bit of rudder trim to the left, huh?
What's that?
You need a little bit of rudder trim to the left.
Okay.
Captain Thomas Welch and First Officer Josef Turner are flying a Boeing 767 from Bangkok, Thailand to Vienna, Austria. The flight is operated by Lauda Air, the brainchild of famed Austrian Formula One driver Niki Lauda.
For me, it was a logical step after retiring from racing to start in this kind of business. And that's what I did with Lauda Air.
Throughout the 70s, Lauda dominated Formula One racing.
Niki was the best driver in his days.
Niki Lauda's Ferrari is still in the lead.
I think Niki is the best-known Austrian since Mozart.
And that's how they finish. Niki Lauda takes the flag.
He won the World Championship 3 times. Then used his fame to launch a new career and a new airline.
One of the main reasons was to give the passengers a different way of flying. Better service, better food. The airplane had to look in a certain way.
The Lauda Air 767 is less than 15 minutes into its 11-hour flight to Vienna. It's a route Niki Lauda knows firsthand, because he's not just the owner of the airline, he's also one of its pilots.
When you run a company and you fly, it's very simple. Because when you are with your passengers, then you know what is going on. You can look yourself what the problems are, and I corrected things quicker in that way.
Capture 13, 5 plus 18, Reserve is 20.
In the cockpit, Captain Welch and First Officer Turner monitor their instruments, while the autopilot controls the climb. Suddenly, the plane begins dropping from the sky. The pilots have lost control. Lauda Flight 4 is plummeting to Earth. The plane slams into a remote jungle 110 miles northwest of Bangkok. When rescuers arrive, it's immediately obvious that there's no one to be rescued. All 213 passengers and 10 crew members are dead.
The airplane took off at 16:01 UTC. There was no fault or whatever reported from the pilots. The airplane flew about 20 to 25 minutes and then suddenly disappeared off the radar screen. So we have no indication whatsoever happened to the airplane.
Investigators in Thailand have made a surprising find. The thrust reverser on Flight 4's left engine is fully deployed.
Once we actually saw that the thrust reverser had deployed, for me it was shocking. It was not anything I really expected would happen.
Thrust reversers help jetliners come to a stop on landing. They work by redirecting engine thrust forward to slow the plane down.
Left side deployed in midair. No doubt.
Planes have built-in safeguards to prevent reversers from deploying during flight. But even if it does happen, it shouldn't cause a crash. In fact, flight testing has already shown exactly that. Before the 767 first went into service, Boeing had to prove that pilots could keep flying safely after a mid-air deployment.
There was a lot of vibration, a lot of noise, but the airplane was controllable.
The pilots only experienced a small loss of lift. As a result, Boeing certified the 767 as capable of continued safe flight and landing under any possible position of the thrust reverser. But the discovery of an engine with a deployed reverser is so unusual, investigators must conclude that it's somehow related to the crash.
How does a thrust reverser bring down a 767? We're missing something.
If it turns out that a faulty thrust reverser can bring down a plane, it has ominous implications for the entire airline industry. The lives of hundreds of thousands of passengers around the world could be in jeopardy.
We recognized that we had something that was very unusual and would require a lot of analysis.
The deployed thrust reverser is the strongest lead investigators have. But no one can figure out how it could have caused the crash. Investigators will have to solve the mystery without their most valuable tool. The flight data recorder is so badly burned that technicians at the NTSB can't recover any data. But there's better news about the cockpit voice recorder. It has survived the fire.
Ready to go?
The voice recorder shows a normal takeoff and climb.
Landing gears up.
All this kind of normal communication, which I knew all the people. So for me, it was honestly hard. This was the hardest part of all my life.
We are clear to level 310 and maintaining Lauda 4.
Flight 4 climbs to 7,000 feet without a problem. A little more than 5.5 minutes into the flight, the first hint of trouble.
Scheiße.
That keeps,
What's come on?
What's come on?
Some kind of warning.
The pilots have noticed an alert that's coming on in the cockpit. Could this be the clue that unlocks the mystery of Lauda Flight 4? Brazil in the late 1980s is a country in transition. Today, millions of soccer-mad Brazilians tune in as their beloved team takes on arch-rival Chile. The critical match in Rio is all anyone is talking about, even 1,000 miles away at Maraba Airport, where the crew of WERENT Flight 254 is getting ready for takeoff. WERENT Flight 254 is scheduled to fly north from the mining town of Maraba to Belém, near the mouth of the Amazon River. Captain Cesar Garces is flying the plane tonight, while First Officer Nilson Zile monitors the instruments.
V1. Rotate.
At 5:35 p.m., the Boeing 737 gets airborne. After 23 minutes, the flight computer tells the captain that they're getting close to Belém. The pilots try to contact controllers on the ground.
Belém Tower, Varig 254. Requesting descent.
Strangely, they get no response from the tower.
Belém Tower, Varig 254. Belém Tower, do you read? That's funny.
What?
We're not picking up the beacon either.
Airports are equipped with very high-frequency omnidirectional range beacons, or VOR beacons. They send out signals that planes follow to the runway.
Why don't we see if we can pick up a local radio station from Belém?
The captain tries to home in on a local radio signal, hoping it will help guide them toward the city. The do-or-die soccer game is being broadcast by radio stations all across the country. The pilots have managed to pick up a local station broadcasting the match. The captain is confident he's now on course. He's spotted a landmark on his radar.
There we go. We're over the Amazon now.
Belém is near the mouth of the Amazon. Following the river should lead the pilots to the city. But moments later, there's serious trouble. At 8:45 p.m., Flight 254 runs out of fuel. The left engine is the first to die.
We just lost an engine!
Hang on. I'm going to put her down.
There goes the other one!
The inevitable impact is just seconds away.
Pull up. Just need to bring us down. Nice and slow.
Of the 54 passengers and crew, 48 have survived.
We have to get you out of here, okay? Can you hear me?
Surviving the crash landing feels like a miracle to many of the passengers. But they now face a new threat to their survival. They're stranded in the vast Amazon rainforest with no food, no water, and no guarantee that they'll ever be found.
No.
Investigators look into the possibility that the navigation system on WERENT Flight 254 malfunctioned and led the crew off course. They suspect the plane's cargo may hold the key. The 737 has a magnetic sensor in the tail that acts as the plane's compass. It tracks which direction the plane is flying and feeds that information to the cockpit instruments. If something in Flight 254's cargo was giving off a strong magnetic field, it might have confused the sensor. They also test every component of the navigation system and check for any sign of failure. But they find nothing in the cargo that could affect the compass. And the instruments are working perfectly. Investigators catch a break. Flight 254's flight plan has been recovered from the cockpit. Airlines provide flight plans to every crew. It contains critical details about the route they should fly, including the heading they're meant to take.
Oh, thanks. Let's see what this will tell us.
But what if the airlines gave the pilots a faulty flight plan, one that sent them in the wrong direction? This could be the lead they've been waiting for.
I think I know what they did wrong.
A close look at WERENT 254's flight plan provides a revelation.
In this particular case with the WERENT flight, very unusually, their computer flight plan system has 4 digits. This is very, very unusual, as I almost always have only 3. The number 0270 was intended to mean 27.0 degrees.
He was supposed to fly north, heading 027.
The captain read it as 270 degrees, or due west. So instead of flying northeast,
they went west instead, going 270. He entered the wrong heading.
He set the airplane up to depart west.
270 degrees, or due west on the compass, is more than 240 degrees past the northerly heading of 27 degrees they were given. The moment of truth arrives when they call Captain Garces back in to give his side of the story. At first, the captain is reluctant to admit he made a mistake. Under intense questioning, Garces finally admits he misread the flight plan.
Look, it was an honest mistake.
Investigators learned the airline began printing their flight plans this new way while the captain was on vacation.
It's easy to see how you get confused.
But there's another question. The first officer must also enter the heading from the flight plan.
So, you think Julia has a chance tonight?
Why did he make exactly the same mistake as the captain?
He could have caught this mistake before they took off.
WERENT 254 takes off due west instead of north, straight into the setting sun.
Geared up.
It's an incomprehensible error.
Did they not realize they were flying into the sun? That should have been a big cue. They must have been very confident that they had done the right thing.
Tocumen International Airport in Panama City.
V1.
COPA Airlines Flight 201 takes off for a short flight to Cali, Colombia.
Rotate. Gear up.
Captain Rafael Chial is COPA's most senior pilot. Today, he's monitoring the instruments.
Set thrust to climb.
First Officer Cesario Tejada is flying the plane. 40 passengers are on board, mostly business travelers heading home to Colombia. The flight usually takes about an hour. But tonight, there's a hitch that could add some time.
We've got some heavy weather moving in from the Gulf.
Flight 201 is heading straight for a storm.
It looks clear to the east.
The pilots need to find a way to fly around the bad weather.
Agreed. I will let them know what we're doing. Panama Center, COPA 201. We'd like to get around this weather, requesting a new heading for 090.
COPA 201, copy that. You're cleared on a heading 090.
Cleared, heading 090. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a short detour to avoid some bumpy weather. It may delay our arrival in Cali. I will keep you posted.
The new flight path will take the 737 east around the storm before heading south again to Cali.
Panama Center, Copa 201.
It's been 12 minutes since takeoff.
Level at 250.
The captain tells controllers he's reached cruising altitude at 25,000 feet. Minutes later, the plane disappears from radar. The controller tries the radio, but gets no response. Graciela Ocana is one of the controllers on duty.
The flight was leaving Panama airspace, entering Colombia airspace.
Hopefully it's just interference from the storm.
The plane's last known location was over Panama's remote Darien Gap.
Their last radar return was here, over the Darien jungle.
The plane has vanished over an almost impenetrable jungle. If Copa 201 crashed here, just getting to the crash site will be a huge struggle. Ocana reports the missing flight to aviation authorities.
Hey, have you had any radio contact with Copa 201?
Then comes the news she's been dreading.
Early in the morning, I received a call from a radio station in Darien.
Any survivors?
Witnesses on the ground have reported a terrifying sight.
During the night, they saw a big ball of fire falling from the sky. We had to find out where the aircraft was and if there was anyone alive they could save.
The next day, searchers make their way to the crash site. But all 47 of the people on board are dead. Investigators need to know if a faulty cockpit instrument was giving the crew of Flight 201 misleading data about the position of their plane. They test the displays and the gyros that feed them.
Well, this one seems to work fine.
They find nothing wrong with the first officer's instrument.
You see the other one?
And they run the same test on the captain's attitude indicator. At first, the captain's instrument seems fine too. Then, they notice something odd.
Hang on, it seems to be stuck.
Occasionally, the display momentarily freezes in place. The attitude indicator stops moving, even though the gyro feeding it is still in motion. Investigators need to know what's causing the failure. They test every wire connecting the display to the gyro.
Oh. No wonder.
Finally, they find the culprit.
This wire is hanging by a thread.
The discovery gives new meaning to the bizarre rolling motion captured by the flight data recorder. The captain's instrument and the flight recorder are both fed by the same gyro. Since the captain's gyro was broken, it was sending faulty roll data to the recorder. Copa 201 didn't really make any quick rolling maneuvers at all.
Okay, let's see what the plane was really doing.
By carefully analyzing other parameters on the flight data recorder, they managed to calculate its actual movements and reveal the plane's true motion. The red image shows the bad data the pilots were seeing, while the solid image shows how Copa 201 was actually flying. The plane rolls so far to the right, it becomes unrecoverable. Though the pilots don't know it, they're now falling from the sky.
Once I got to this point, they didn't have a chance.
But a puzzling question remains. It was the captain's gyro that failed in flight and started sending bad data. So why did the pilots select it?
Okay, let's start.
Investigators go into the type of flight simulator the Copa crew used for their 737 training.
Climb to 25,000 and turn right.
They recreate the flight of Copa 201.
Now, trigger the failure.
Including the malfunction of the captain's attitude indicator.
Now, how'd you make the switch? Wait a minute, let me see that. That is not the same switch that was on Copa 201.
two different configurations for one small control switch has overwhelming implications for the investigation. In the simulator, flipping the toggle to the left switches the captain's instrument to an auxiliary gyro, independent of the other two. On Flight 201, flipping the switch to the left puts both instruments on the captain's malfunctioning gyro.
Panama Center, COPA 201, level at 250.
Roger that, 201.
With no voice recording from the cockpit of COPA 201, investigators will never know for certain who flipped the switch the wrong way. But they finally collected enough evidence to build a compelling theory of how the flight went so horribly wrong.
Nippon Cargo 37, runway 34 left, cleared to land.
The MD-11 is still a popular workhorse for flying cargo. FedEx relies on the plane to haul millions of tons of freight in and out of crucial hubs like Tokyo's Narita Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world.
Narita Tower, FedEx 80, 13 miles for 34 left.
54-year-old Kevin Mosley is the captain on FedEx Flight 80. His first officer is 49-year-old Anthony Pino. The two veteran pilots are second in line to land at Narita.
FedEx 80, Narita Tower on runway 34 left, continue approach.
FedEx 80, roger.
7 minutes from landing, the controller gives the crew an update about the wind conditions on the runway.
Okay, copy that.
The pilots are in the midst of their approach, a crucial time in any flight. The crew must perform dozens of steps to lose altitude and drop about 400 miles an hour of airspeed before they touch down. It's a very busy time in the cockpit. On this flight, the pilots have an additional challenge to contend with: powerful winds.
Any thoughts on landing speed? Let's add 10 knots. Make it 164 knots.
They need to come in faster than usual to combat the gusty conditions.
Landing gear. Gear down. 4 green.
500.
We cleared to land, 34 left. Stable.
The plane is dropping 13 feet per second. It will be on the ground in less than 5 seconds. Without warning, the MD-11 is upside down in flames.
There's a crash on 34 left and there's fire.
Fire crews race to the runway, where a massive blaze has engulfed the cockpit of FedEx Flight 80. It's the biggest air disaster the Tokyo airport has ever seen. Air traffic controllers must now redirect incoming flights away from the burning debris. It takes almost half an hour for firefighters to douse the flames surrounding the cockpit. By the time rescuers get inside, it's too late for the pilots. 2 people are dead, and another MD-11 lies burning at the side of a runway. This is the first fatal accident in Narita Airport's 31-year history. The aviation world needs to know why this MD-11 landing went so wrong. Flight 80's cockpit recording is now in the hands of investigators. But will it tell them why the pilots couldn't get their planes safely on the ground?
Narita Tower, FedEx 80, 13 miles for 34 left.
FedEx 80, Narita Tower on runway 34 left, continue approach.
FedEx 80, roger.
All right, let's begin the before landing checklist.
Got it.
So far, so good.
The approach to Narita is textbook.
Landing gear.
Gear down. Winds are 320, maximum at 34 knots.
Okay, stop for a second. Winds 320, maximum 34. It's right in their face.
The recording reveals the crew was flying into a strong headwind, but it wasn't dangerous enough to explain the crash.
Okay, let's go on.
1,000.
Yeehaw! Ride 'em, cowboy.
Don't let the airplane fly you, you fly the airplane. And on a gusty, blustery day, that's in fact what you have to do.
500.
Despite the bumpy ride, the pilots don't seem very concerned.
Clear to land, 34 left. Stable.
Stable approach is one of the call-outs that more and more carriers have put into their operation specifications that you call out, because generally that's a pretty well understood thing. If you're stable, you can land.
Yeah. 1 minute from the runway, and they're joking. Seems like there's nothing wrong.
From the recording, we can tell that they were really relaxed and teasing each other. I think what happened was that the air currents were so rough that it felt like they were in a rodeo, riding an untamed horse like cowboys.
Then, an automated voice from the altimeter gives investigators an important clue.
40, 30, 20, 10.
That last part again, please.
50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
It should slow down. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
100.
The recording tells investigators the plane's descent didn't slow down when it should have, but instead continued dropping at a rapid rate. It explains the hard landing, but not the crash. Another critical question remains. Why didn't the pilots slow their descent? Till they can answer that question, investigators won't know the full story behind the crash of FedEx Flight 80. Kennedy makes a final pre-flight check of his new plane, a Piper Saratoga.
It's top of the line, single engine, 6-seater. It was well equipped with a GPS, a global positioning system. The selling point for the Saratoga was it has 4 club seats facing each other in the rear of the aircraft.
Seatbelts on, please. There are some headsets back there if you want to listen in. All right, battery on, fuel pump on, and propeller is clear.
The flight to Martha's Vineyard should take about 90 minutes. After that, it's just a short hop to Hyannisport.
The route from Essex County Airport to Martha's Vineyard, he was quite familiar. He'd done it several times.
At 8:40 p.m., more than 2 hours behind schedule, the flight gets underway.
75 knots. Oh, yeah.
Like many private pilots, Kennedy is flying under visual flight rules, or VFR.
You stay clear of clouds, you have to have good visibility. You're always looking outside, able to see the horizon and orient the airplane using your visual cues.
And that's the best view of New York you're ever gonna get.
Once you turned towards the east, you had a nice view of Manhattan, the Hudson River. On a good day, you could see, 30 miles or so at altitude.
Kennedy cruises at just 5,500 feet, a typical altitude for small planes. Around 9:30 p.m., he leaves the mainland coast behind.
Just leave him on talk over there.
I don't see a thing.
His flight path was following the coast, so he would want to go south over the Long Island Sound to line up and set up for a long straight end for the runway.
He expects to reach their first destination in about half an hour.
We'll have you on the ground by 10 for sure.
But by 10 o'clock,
Martha's Vineyard Tower.
Airport security here.
the air traffic controller at Martha's Vineyard Airport has had no contact with the Kennedy plane.
Any word on that flight?
Negative. I haven't been notified of that arrival.
Overdue flights are not uncommon. But as the hours pass with no sign of the Piper Saratoga, a chilling reality sets in. John F. Kennedy, his wife, and sister-in-law are missing without a trace. Investigators zero in on a theory that may explain the fatal accident that killed John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife Carolyn, and her sister Lauren. At the center of it all, a pilot in over his head, battling a mounting list of pressures.
No, you shouldn't worry. No, we've got it.
I'm having problems at work. I need to get to this wedding. My ankle hurts. I get in the airplane, that's why I bought this airplane. I need to get from point A to point B. That's the whole point of having this airplane and learning to fly, so we're gonna go.
I think I know why things started to go wrong.
127.25.
A badly tuned radio and a hazy night allow investigators to imagine a scenario that may explain the flight's tragic end.
It started after he cleared New York.
In hazy conditions, Kennedy would have no visual reference to tell him which way is up.
As it was getting dark in marginal conditions, he was in a very precarious area for visual flight rule, VFR flying. As he headed out over the water and all those lights were behind him, all that visual reference was gone.
He looks away from his instruments for like a second.
127.25.
Remember, his frequency was off. Maybe he was trying to tune the radio.
He might look to see if the frequency had changed or if he had got it wrong in his mind.
Still nothing. Just something weird with the radio. No big deal.
While all that's going on, it's quite easy for the airplane to slip into a little bit of a bank, one direction or another.
If you're in a turn for an extended period of time, your inner ear can feel a reverse of the turn, and you can become spatially disoriented very easily.
What the? What? It can't be.
When he looks back, his instruments are telling him one thing, his senses another.
What the?
You have to be well trained to disregard what your brain is saying and look at your instruments, work on your scan, and fly by your instruments.
Once he becomes disoriented, Kennedy is too inexperienced to force himself to believe his instruments, no matter what his senses are telling him.
Nothing's working.
So it's the only thing that fits. Spatial disorientation.
Everybody ready?
Yes.
Concorde's takeoff speed is 228 miles per hour, 46 miles faster than a 747.
Four greens.
The plane's 4 afterburners ignite, giving the engines the boost they need to achieve that incredible speed.
As it passes you, you feel it and you hear it because it is loud and strong, and it's just a beautiful sight to the spectator and the aviator.
V1. The first officer tells the captain they've reached V1, or decision speed. They're now going too quickly to abort the takeoff.
You cannot stop anymore. You have to go on. You have to continue takeoff, whatever happens.
Watch out!
Suddenly, the plane begins veering left.
Stop!
The flight engineer urges the captain to abort the takeoff, but it's too late to stop. Captain Marty lifts the supersonic jet into the air. Gilles Longelin realizes he's now watching a disaster.
It was a very unexpected situation to see flames on an aircraft that is departing on the runway. You don't have time to lose, so immediately I've pushed the red button, which is a button for alert.
4590, you have flames behind you.
Roger!
The plane is engulfed in flames.
Failure! Engine 2! Engine fire procedure!
Captain Marty struggles for control as the engineer shuts down the burning engine and activates a fire extinguisher.
What's the airspeed?
The plane's airspeed is now dangerously low.
The airspeed!
Something is happening. Some things that is not covered by training. Something that in pilot career you don't want to face.
Longelin scrambles to clear other planes from Concorde's path.
I wanted to clear the traffic to let him any option possible.
First Officer Marceau wants to head for a nearby airport.
Le Bourget!
But the crew can't outfly the fire that is rapidly consuming their plane. Shocking images of the unfolding disaster are captured by amateur video. In the cabin, panic and terror.
No time!
The supersonic marvel of modern aviation.
No!
Slams into an airport hotel.
Oh mon Dieu.
I could see kind of big, like a big mushroom of smoke. I think until the very last moments where I was thinking that something will save the situation. I remember that I just sat down on the carpet floor of the control tower up there and I cried.
How much fuel have we used?
Flight engineer Gilles Jardineau keeps a vigilant eye on fuel consumption.
We've got 800 kilos.
Concorde burns through it at an astonishing rate. In the short taxi to the runway, the plane's 4 engines have already used as much fuel as the average car uses in 6 months. Booking a seat on the famed jet requires deep pockets. The return fare to New York costs more than $9,000.
It was not something unaffordable for those people we had on board. Some of them, I tell you, they didn't even know how much they were paying.
Air France 4590, runway 26 right, clear for takeoff.
4590, cleared for takeoff. 26 right.
The tower controller today is Gilles Longelin.
I was stationed in the southern control tower, which has a very good view over the 2 runways that we use. This day was the same as usual. I gave him the takeoff clearance.
first officer tells the captain they've reached V1, or decision speed. They're now going too quickly to abort the takeoff.
You cannot stop anymore. You have to go on. You have to continue takeoff, whatever happens.
Watch out!
Suddenly, the plane begins veering left.
Stop!
The flight engineer urges the captain to abort the takeoff, but it's too late to stop. Captain Marty lifts the supersonic jet into the air. Gilles Longelin realizes he's now watching a disaster.
It was a very unexpected situation to see flames on an aircraft that is departing on the runway. You don't have time to lose, so immediately I've pushed the red button, which is a button for alert.
4590, you have flames behind you.
Roger!
The plane is engulfed in flames.
Failure! Engine 2!
Engine fire procedure!
Captain Marty struggles for control as the engineer shuts down the burning engine and activates a fire extinguisher.
What's the airspeed?
The plane's airspeed is now dangerously low.
The airspeed!
Something is happening. Some things that is not covered by training. Something that in pilot career you don't want to face.
First Officer Marceau wants to head for a nearby airport.
Le Bourget!
But the crew can't outfly the fire that is rapidly consuming their plane. The supersonic marvel of modern aviation.
No!
Slams into an airport hotel.
Oh mon Dieu.
I could see kind of big, like a big mushroom of smoke. I think until the very last moments I was thinking that something will save the situation.
November 4th, 2008. A Learjet 45 is cruising over central Mexico.
Victor Mike Charlie, radar contact, descend to 200.
200, Mike Charlie.
Alvaro Sanchez and Martín Oliva are at the controls. Both pilots are captains. But tonight, Captain Oliva is flying the plane.
I'll start setting 250, Alvaro, okay?
Sounds right to me.
The flight is a special government charter.
We must be getting close.
The country's interior minister and his entourage are flying to Mexico City. The politicians are on their way back to the capital after a day of talks aimed at combating the nation's skyrocketing rate of violent crime. The Mexican government has chartered a Learjet 45 for the flight. It's a high-performance aircraft that's also economical to fly.
Victor Mike Charlie, descend to 15,000 feet. Altimeter 3024.
15,000 with 3024, Mike Charlie. 1,000 feet until we level off.
Thanks, Alvaro.
As the Learjet nears the outskirts of Mexico City, the pilots prepare to land.
Landing lights. Yep. Check.
Victor Mike Charlie, reduce your speed to 180 knots.
Reducing speed to 180, Mike Charlie.
The air traffic controller asks the Learjet crew to slow down to maintain their position in the lineup of planes.
Should I pull the nose up?
No, leave it. Leave it for now.
Tonight, Alvaro Sanchez is serving as something of a mentor.
But we're about to level off, right?
Yes.
He's more experienced in the Learjet than Captain Oliva.
There, speed stabilized.
Okay.
This is one of the busiest and most critical stages of any flight.
Flap down.
Sanchez extends the flap so he can further reduce their speed.
Give me 8800, please.
8800.
Below them, Mexico City is a sprawling metropolis of 20 million people, with some of the worst traffic in the world. A sea of cars fills the downtown district.
Oh my God!
Without warning, the Learjet goes into a steep dive and plummets toward the ground.
What do we do? Alvaro! Give it to me! Give it to me!
The first officer calls for control of the plane.
It's yours, Alvaro!
He hauls his control column back, trying to pull the plane out of the dive. Ulrika Bjorkstam is in the street below, waiting for a cab.
All of a sudden, I saw this plane flying like really low. I had the time to turn around and I started running away from it. But of course, the plane was a little bit faster than what I was. I remember thinking that, well, this is it. This is it for me.
We have a few minutes. Show me that report.
Despite some damage from fire and impact forces, technicians have been able to recover the recorded data.
We knew we didn't have FDR. We were glad to hear, though, that the CVR did work and that the accident flight had been captured.
All right, I think we waited long enough. Let's hear it.
Victor Mike Charlie, reduce your speed to 180 knots.
Reducing speed to 180, Mike Charlie.
Because it's a small aircraft, we could hear not just all the sounds that were in the cockpit, but we could also hear the sounds in the cabin.
We must be getting close.
As they listen to the moments just before the crash, they hear nothing out of the ordinary.
No, leave it.
Leave it for now.
One of the things that it did reassure us is that there was not an intentional act that brought down the aircraft. There was no sounds similar to a struggle. There was no sounds of an explosive device. And so that helped close the book on that aspect of the investigation.
The mystery of what did cause the crash persists.
Flap down.
Investigators listen as the pilots descend toward the runway.
Look. Yeah. You're all lined up in front of us.
All seems well until...
Turbulence from that thing. Oh, man.
One of the interesting things that we did hear was that the flight crew did mention turbulence.
What the hell?
All right, sounds like that's where the trouble starts. Where are we at? 14 seconds before hitting the ground.
It seems the Learjet hit a patch of violently unstable air.
Oh my God!
All of a sudden, boom, they're upside down, plummeting towards the ground.
Alvaro! What do we do? Alvaro!
Without the flight data, the voice recording leaves investigators with only a partial picture.
We don't know exactly what each of these pilots was thinking at the time. We don't know what control inputs were being made, but it shows that there was that confusion factor in the cockpit of what to do, how to recover the aircraft from the upset.
They don't seem to know what hit them.
Alvaro! What do we do, Alvaro? Give it to me! Give it to me!
You know, hearing that sound and, you know, putting myself in their place and knowing what that outcome is going to be, it's got to be horrible.
It's yours, Alvaro!
They tried to pull out, it wasn't enough. They had so little time, they had so little altitude.
We had a normal flight coming in, and then we had a loss of control relatively quick. There was no evidence of any mechanical failure.
So what do you think? Wake turbulence?
So we had to really look at the possibility of a wake turbulence event.
Wake turbulence forms when the low-pressure air above the wing draws high-pressure air upward, creating a swirling vortex that trails behind the aircraft as it flies.
As a plane flies along, each of its wingtips is generating a tiny horizontal tornado called a wingtip vortex.
The powerful vortices can linger in the air for minutes at a time, creating an invisible hazard for other aircraft.
When a smaller plane flies into these rotating columns of air at low altitude, they can spin out of control and crash into the ground within seconds.
The commuter flight from Belfast, Northern Ireland, was supposed to land in Cork at 9 a.m.
Maybe Kerry.
30 minutes later, it's still circling the airport.
Cork faces out to the Atlantic, so fog is very common, and fog will roll in and it will roll out, sometimes at no notice.
In our part of the world, we have a saying, it was like pea soup, because it was very, very thick.
Hope we land soon. I've got work to do.
There are 10 passengers waiting to land this morning, including Lawrence Wilson, traveling to Cork for the day on business.
I was going to Cork to do forklift truck training. I had been in that same location, doing the same course several times before. So it was sort of really old hat to go down. I've done it before.
Today's flight is aboard a Fairchild Metro 3. Flying the plane today is First Officer Andrew Cantle of England. While he concentrates on circling over Cork, Spanish Captain Jordi Sola Lopez is checking the weather at nearby airports.
Surface wind is calm. Visibility is 900 meters in fog.
All copy, thanks very much. And the weather, is it improving in Cork?
At 9:35, the controller tells the captain the fog is lifted slightly.
Visibility at touchdown zone is 500 meters.
Okay, in that case, any chance to perform one approach there?
You are clear to land, runway 17.
Clear to land, runway 17.
After 30 minutes circling the airport, the crew must now shift focus to the complex task of getting their plane on the ground.
We're good. I've landed and worse. Glide slope is coming in.
The pilot confirms the plane is lining up with the runway.
Okay, glide slope is coming in.
And they're descending at the correct speed.
Speed's okay. I took control of their power, okay?
The captain tells the first officer he'll adjust the engine power during the landing.
That's fine, yeah. All daylights are on. Landing gear is down. Yes, the weather is much better here.
So I was on the left-hand side of the plane, looking out just behind the wing. And I remember I couldn't see anything, no runway, nothing at all.
The captain pulls the thrust levers back to reduce power. Unexpectedly, the plane rolls hard to the left.
What the heck? Go around! Go around!
Hang on! I remember looking out the window and seeing grass about 10 foot below me. And I knew that wasn't good. Thought I was gone. I did for a minute or two. I thought I was gone. I thought, this is it. I'm out of here. That's all about it.
Black box data from Flight 7100 is finally in the hands of investigators. But will it give them the breakthrough they're hoping for?
All copy, thanks very much. And the weather, is it improving in Cork?
The voice recorder has captured the pilot's conversation in the crucial moments before the crash.
Speed's okay.
Liddy listens as the pilots discuss their landing preparations. At this stage, everything seems normal.
I took control of their power, okay?
Then he hears something unexpected.
Yeah, that's
fine, yeah.
The captain's going to handle the power? What kind of plan is that?
They're starting to deviate from standard procedures by doing things like splitting command of the aircraft or control of the aircraft, which is not a good idea.
Normally, the pilot flying the plane would be the one adjusting the engine throttles.
If someone else is making those changes, there's going to be a delay in the response from the pilot flying, an unnecessary and undesired response.
Okay, minimum.
But it's not only that decision that seems off. There's also something odd about the sound of the engines.
The cockpit voice recorder can also give you a lot of information about the acceleration of the engines being powered up, the engines being powered down. So you can actually glean quite an amount of information about that.
Go around.
Go around.
Can you try and just bring up the engine sounds? Sounds like those two engines were operating at different power levels.
The difficulty in this situation is that it's a twin-engine aircraft, so the cockpit voice recorder will tell you something is going on, but it doesn't tell you which engine it actually is.
Searching for something that could explain the mysterious sounds coming from the engines, Liddy studies engine performance data from the flight recorder. It confirms his suspicion. The left engine was producing more power than the right engine, something not uncommon on prop planes like the Metro 3. Uneven engine thrust does make it slightly more difficult to keep the plane flying level, especially at low airspeeds. It's one more thing for pilots to think about during a complicated landing.
Wait a minute.
Liddy notices something even more troubling.
It looks like engine number 1 went into reverse.
Turboprop engines use the angle or pitch of the blades to change the direction of airflow.
The propeller has an angle and through rotation takes a bite out of air like a screw. When selecting reverse, what's happening to the propeller pitch is it's flattening out and going into a negative blade angle, causing air to be pushed forward instead of aft.
That is one thing you don't want to happen in flight because it can actually reduce the airplane to below its stalling speed, so the airplane will actually stall.
The data suggests
What the heck?
the captain brought the power levers back too far, putting the more powerful left engine into reverse.
If one were to do that in flight, you're going to have a forward moment on the right wing, you're going to have an aft moment on the left wing. And in this case, it caused a severe roll to the left.
Go around.
The captain immediately tried to correct his mistake by pushing the throttles forward. But again, the uneven engine thrust caught him off guard.
Left engine, powered up faster, pushed them over to the right.
That roll was, and yaw was quite vicious and actually caused the airplane to go right over on its side.
I took control of the power.
After 2 aborted landings, perhaps the captain was trying to help the first officer deal with the power imbalance by taking control of the throttles.
Okay, minimum.
But it only made matters worse.
If the first officer, who was the pilot flying, had had control of the power levers and the yoke, the flight controls, he would have felt and known where the power levers were at.
Makes the whole task of steering the aircraft much more difficult because you don't have control over the power.
The Canadian Arctic is one of the toughest environments on the planet. Winters here are brutal. 8 months long, with temperatures plunging to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Even now, during the long days of the Arctic summer, the average temperature is barely above freezing. There are no roads to this part of the world. Virtually the only way to get here is by air. Resolute Bay Airport is the only one in the region equipped with navigational aids for automated landing approaches. First Air Flight 6560 is a charter flying passengers and cargo to the small community.
Wind 180 degrees at 8 knots.
First Officer David Hare studied business before setting his sights on aviation. He joined First Air 4 years ago.
First Air 6560, copy, thank you. There we go.
Captain Blair Rutherford has been with the airline for more than 15 years.
Might as well do yours too. Heading 029 degrees. Got it.
This close to the magnetic North Pole, pilots need to calibrate their compasses frequently using their GPS.
Okay, let's go over the approach. Okay. Altitude alert set to 2200.
Because of the heavy fog, the crew will be relying on their autopilot during the approach.
Checklist complete. Autopilot set.
This way, they don't have to worry about lining up with the runway visually. The computer will do all the work until they're ready to touch down.
You're landing on runway 35 true. It's a little wet.
First Air 6560, copy, 35 true.
We're 10 miles from runway.
At 11:40 a.m., Flight 6560 begins its final approach to the runway.
Descending through 1,000 feet. First Air 6560, we're 3 miles out on final. We're over the shoreline now. All right.
The sound of an urgent alarm fills the cockpit.
Go around, go for it.
It's the low altitude warning. To the pilots, it seems impossible. They don't even have the runway in sight yet.
Go around. Go around thrusts.
The captain decides to abort the landing. But it may be too late. Flight 6560 slams into the ground at 180 miles an hour. The plane skids across the crest of a hill and bursts into flames. The priority now, get help to any survivors.
Think to yourself, wow, I really hope someone survived this, but you know this is going to be bad.
At the crash site, Gabrielle Pelkey sits alone in a nightmare.
She found herself with a broken leg, cuts and bruises, and concern for her little sister Cheyenne.
Geologist Nicole Williamson has also survived.
Gabrielle. Oh, thank God.
When Nicole got to Gabrielle,
You're okay. You're okay.
she made sure that Gabrielle was kept warm, and that was something that probably helped her with her own survival.
This is my first plane crash.
Yeah. Me too, sweetie. Me too.
For Nicole to hear that from a child, it sort of brought home, you know, the innocence of it all.
Okay. All right.
Trying to survive at that moment, it was a way of focusing on each other.
As they stumble through the wreckage, they find only one other survivor, Robin Wiley.
They managed to get to a location where they felt, okay, this is probably a safe location, and wait and hope for the best.
The 3 survivors are suffering from shock and shivering in near freezing temperatures. If help doesn't arrive soon, they may die from exposure. News of the disaster reaches air crash investigators still in flight, including the TSP's Brian McDonald.
We kind of looked at each other in disbelief, as if, you know, is somebody changing the start of the exercise to create more realism, or is this really happening?
We need to hit the ground running.
Now you're quickly changing gears into thinking about all the things we have to do now to get ready and start reacting to this actual accident.
As the investigators touch down, they grapple with the realization that the mock exercise they were expecting is now a very real catastrophe. But there is some good news. Because of Operation Nanook, rescuers are able to reach the survivors just 20 minutes after the accident.
There are survivors. I repeat, there are survivors.
Having been to several aircraft crashes throughout my 20-year career, shock would be an understatement that these people had survived. They didn't appear to have any life-threatening injuries, so we elected to fairly rapidly stabilize some immediate fractures, get them on some stretchers, and get them down to a facility that could properly evaluate and treat them in an environment that was more stable.
Rescuers comb through the wreckage, but they quickly realize no one else has survived the crash. 12 people are dead,